Hi, it's Ryan, and this week's video is about a general list advice and a litmus test that I've seen battered around some Infinity servers. And to be honest, it's not a bad test. So I'm going to go through two of my lists I played and then immediately made changes to. One is pretty decent and the other is not very good. I'll talk about how they stack up to this test and how I've improved them, and a little bit if this test is worth a damn. Spoiler alert, it's another great tool. The test. So I've got them on screen, but really I think it's pretty solid. You see some of each of these each game, and probably most if not all in a tournament setting with 3+ opponents. So let's break it down. Question 1 and 2 are pretty standard for going into games or tournaments. Bit difficult if you're going in blind to tournament or maybe pickup games, but if you know your local, then you can answer this pretty well. As I've mentioned in my last video, this will affect list building. I've seen dozens of people talk about bringing specific lists to counter things like Cosmoflot, Vanilla Ariadna, and the Avatar Combined Army lists. I've seen dozens more people talk about specific lists for highly classified or firefights, since they require massively different lists between the two. An example for this will be if I'm playing, say, military orders, I might suspect I'm going against nomads. If that's true, you'll see me taking more firewalls, tin bots, dart, and killer hacking devices to counter them, regardless of mission, so long as it's not impeding my ability to do the rest of the mission. If I know I'm playing Frostbite or Firefight with Immo, I'm far more likely to have a list that is just a 5-man pain train to help me with those missions, since I'm less likely to give up points. Question 3 and 4 are pretty important to think about, so that you can deal with it if you don't get your way, because even sometimes a Whip 17 lieutenant can lose the roll. You might get crit, or you might roll a 20. 5 through 12 directly affect list construction and are all things that we should be thinking about when building a list. What are your active pieces, and what your feeding order choose are probably going to be the same pieces, but maybe not. Reactive turn, expendable, and maybe backup plans might be similar, if not the same. For example, I have ARO pieces that work as sandbags to delay enemies, such as Catarans and Scots missiles. I expect them to go down, but I expect them to at least take something with them. I also bring heavy rocket launcher and missile launchers in cores, and then will defend with them and use them as a team as a backup turn 3 to grab or kill whatever I need them to, usually as they'll survive to the end. In regards to leaving your drop zone and where you list wants to fight, that's really valuable to know, as you don't want to get caught out by the fact you have nothing that can test a sniper. If you're struggling to answer these questions, then maybe the list needs a rewrite before you even move on to the next slot. 13 through 20 are obviously your responses to common threats and absolutely something worth talking about. As the note said at the bottom, you don't need an answer for all these, but you gotta be at least aware of it, and different factions deal with different things differently. For example, Caledonia and Ariadna will largely ignore hackers and smoke, tag, and Rambo units will be fine to some extent thanks to camo and skirmishers. But things like links, min-6, infiltrators, and some camo and impersonation will really hurt Ariadna with its obvious and squishy lieutenants. Military orders will care a lot about hackers, smoke, and some infiltration and cam workers, but it will not care for links, Rambos, and airborne deployment, thanks to things loving closer range engagements and strong CC on the big units. The next 4 talk about how you spend resources in the game and how you shape and control the battlefield. I usually spend my command token reforming fire teams as required, although in Caledonia I'm also kind of spending them on coordinated orders. Usually I know what I'm doing with them before I go into a match. Fire lane wise, I usually have at least one defensive piece per fire lane, but in my armies that tends to only be out to HMG ranges. So if I have too long of a fire lane, I might swap out how I hand it to watch a shorter section of it to give myself some advantage. The last few points talk about ranges on guns, and if you have templates for hacking or zone of control weapons like jammer. It's good to bring these, and it can make swaths of the table unapproachable to some units, and being able to fight at more ranges is always nice. As I said, you don't need an answer to all these, but you need to be aware, and as we can see, you might not realise you're missing something. The military orders list. I lose fairly often, and it doesn't bother me too much. But I like to figure out why I've lost so I can improve, and this list was probably part of it in this match. I don't do defense well either, which was the main part of it, but let's talk about the list. So I was playing this list to try out Constantino, Knight Hospitalers, Crusader Brethrens, and of the 3, I think Knight Hospitalers are the only ones I look at here and go, yeah, they can stay. Crusader Brethren would be really nice if they had specialist orders, but I don't think I want to waste that Trinitarian slot. You'll notice 2 order sergeants, a missile bot, and a peacemaker, and I went second, and all 3 became dead weight. Are they bad? No, just maybe not required. The core was fine, as was the Harris heavy infantry, so in general, not a bad list, and I had a reason to run it. So who and what was my opponent? Well, it was an experienced player running vanilla Ariadna, and there were templates galore. So my list crumbled to an excellent push from a dog warrior that proceeded to swat as much as he could. The bear tried to do the same, but an S-Det and a core-linked heavy rocket launcher blew that bear apart. Did manage to get a car, but I lost supplies 6-1 to a very experienced player. It was a quick match, and it inspired the video. So let's talk about the list in regards to the test and identify what went wrong. Then I'll talk about the revised version and how it addresses the issues. As I've mentioned, I was playing supplies, and this list was designed as an all-comers list. In terms of going first, I always like to go first in MO. In reality, this list was missing my preferred second midfield specialist. It could not handle CI, and it obviously did not have enough ARO or arbalative pieces to handle going second, and did not have a good enough lieutenant to ensure that I would go first. So we've got like 3.5 issues, and we're about 4 points into the test. Active turn, I think we're solid. We have a beefy Harris to gunfight and steal objectives. The Peacemaker can zone out stuff for spotlight, and given some evil buff, can handily kill things. Once the midfield is clear, then the Trin can pick up objective. So active turn plan, check. Didn't test it in action, but I'm pretty confident on the theory. Reactive, my plan was to use the heavy rocket launcher Blackfriar to counter stuff, and that worked, but that was my only plan, and looking at the list, besides the missile launcher bot and some aggressive Oxbot placement, and maybe a HMG and suppressive fire, there was no real reactive plan. Overall, it was a bit poor, and in my game, it got exploited. So what are my expendable units? Well, there is none, and stuff just crumbled, and to be honest, that's a bit of an issue in MO, but here it really shows. There were no war cores, no tech bees, no Raven Eyes, mines. Everything here was really expensive and needed, and it hurt when it went down. Finally, I had no backup plan besides throwing a massive core at it, and in the end, that has never really worked for me. In terms of what it can deal with, well, it can deal with most of them, except the Rambos, which I lost to, and probably maybe Uxia and Fide. But even then, I think I had enough to slow them down. Holding the Peacemaker in reserve meant that Uxia or Fide would have struggled to not get discovered or burned to a crisp. Command tokens would have been spent on fire teams and moving orders around. Firelane control was minimal, but could have been better, and I was in a good position to largely pick my ranges with the map. A BS-14 heavy rocket launcher with MSV2 means only really cover and ranges are going to affect me, and I think I had plenty of area control with the 2 hackers and a good few repeaters. No templates, they're not super common in MO. So looking over this test, do I do well? No, I think I'm lacking basically half the game. Missing orders in Group 2 and not having enough specialists means I made a list that just needs more refinement. So this is what I've remade it to. I think it's a good bit better, but I'm yet to try it out. But even just looking at it, we're ticking more boxes. We have better ARO coverage, better anti-hackers, and more specialists. I have backup plans in well-supplied Trins, Pathfinders, and 3 Knights and Harris that even if it falls apart, I know can be trusted to go up and complete a mission. The core is better balanced with some EM, and a missile launcher for AP, and more repeaters. Although, no midfield repeaters. For now, 2 unique hackers to take advantage of. I do lose my MSV2 heavy rocket launcher, which really carried its weight against vanilla Ariadna since basically denied all the smoke shenanigans and dealt with mimetism. And I mean, I think the Teutonic Knight missile launcher could easily be swapped back to the heavy rocket launcher Blackfriar. It really depends on dodge and wounds versus multispectral visors, and always taking the shot back. Albedo might make a difference, but I've literally seen that once in 2 years of N4. So are there any sectorials or factions this worries about? Probably Nomad or Pitcher armies, but honestly no more than military orders, and no less than the other list. Can this blunt Rambos, even the total immune ones? Yes, now that I'm contesting them with flash pulses and marksmanship combi rifles. Fides and Uxia have more repeaters to worry about, so that's more hassle, more robots, more chances to discovers, with 360-degree visors to cover a lot of lanes, so that's just discover attempts that could be contested. I'm more comfortable going second now as a result, so my lieutenant just being a Teutonic Knight is fine. I'm spending my resources probably not much differently, although I have more potential solo pieces and orders in each group, so I can keep them filled up regardless of what is needed. I know from experience that Santiago will be a terror, assuming it doesn't get guided missile striked. Range-wise, I have a HMG missile launcher, combi rifle, spread around, so I'm pretty confident. I can only really be outrange with a sniper, but ideally that's against a Burst 5 BS-14 HMG on Armor 4, or a Burst 2 missile launcher on BS-14, or dodging on 17s. So yeah, I mean, it might be a problem, but it's manageable. If I'm sensible with defense, I reckon we could really lock down turn 1, or if we go first, fight our way out of the drop zone with HMGs and attach Coma, Pathfinder, and missile launcher to clear out anything, and then maybe use the trins. It's got options. Overall, much improved if I do say so myself. So here's my second list, and it's much better starting point. It lacks a core, but the only goal here is the Bear and the Harris to make up for it. Overall, I just lost with this, and I only really tweaked it to get what I want from Cosmoflop. But to start this list was to sample and try out the best things from Cosmoflop, but this had a lot more thought put into it, and either way, I'm very happy with it. But I just wanted to tweak it just because, you know, I can. So who was my opponent? It was Vanilla Yujing. And I believe it was a pretty standard list as far as they go, with Quangshi, Monks, Luna, Crit Quorum, and a Blue Wolf. It was supplies yet again, but this game was a while ago, and at the time I really had a hankering for a game of it. I believe I went second, but if I went first, it didn't really matter, as I'd failed my 2 attack runs. But very quickly, my Power Commando was zoned out as they believed I had equipping Mirage 5, which is fair, but it's a reason I kind of like airborne deployment. Crit Quorum slowed me down with his mine, and Luna killed my Cataran easily, although failed to murder one of my Varangians, and we danced around that. The SAS and the 1-2s and my secondary and tertiary pieces didn't do much, but the Harris did, putting 2 wounds on the Blue Wolf, taking an objective, splatting a ninja, and Luna. Wallace killed the tag, but did not do much else. It was a good game, the list was sound, but I lost and I wanted to tweak it with some lessons learned. So what were the lessons learned? Armandinos are nice, but I forgot Booty exists. They're specialists, but lack doggage, which means getting shot by MSV or anything with range means they're worse than even a Galwegian or Varangian. They do have decharges though, which are nice. Next, the Bear is a tag level threat. You have to react to it, which is what I wanted to some extent. But the Impetuous on something this big is a little useless if the map doesn't support it. The general discussion about regular versus irregular Bear is a whole thing, and in the role of Murder Dog midfield distraction murder ball, I think this might be better for me as a distraction counterfacts, as its arm ain't cover, immutable mind you. Yeah, you can die with templates, but I dodge on 16s or smoke dodge on 19s. Oh, and I forgot, it has grenades, so woe be to anything outside of camo. I only had a Harris, which is scary, but if you're smart, it probably is enough. The Cataran definitely isn't a defensive piece, or a very good one. I routinely talk about him being more of an active turn sniper, and this game convinced me of that, as Measure Luna wrecked him in maybe 1 or 2 orders, as she was the perfect counter for him, but the general experience made me take stock and talk with the others to figure out what was going on with him and how to improve. I think he can be a sandbag, but you're kind of wasting his potential. I need to keep better track of my orders. Nothing here, just a personal get good at counting. So now the litmus test. Like before, this was an all-comers. I rarely don't do that unless I have a tournament or event. As always, I wanted to go first, but I have enough defense here that second doesn't bother me. Active turn, we have a Bear! Corporal Winnie the Pooh! We have this Harris of a good shooter and 2 different specialists who can heal the heavy infantry in 2 different ways, and 4 warbands, which may be excessive, but this is Ariadna, so we'll just tick that. Reactive turn, we have warbands, a Cataran, and a Warcore, which really didn't stop anything, and we kind of hold off opponents through active defense, so we'll tick that. Orders go into the Bear, the Harris, Paracommandos, and the SAS, so lots of redundancy. We have expendable units in all 5 warbands, Cataran, and plenty of backup with the SAS, Wallace, and the 112. The Paracommando is our final piece and backup plan, so we'll take that. Range-wise, I've got lots covered. HMG, rifles, templates, and even a sniper, so pretty perfect. Okay, so can this list deal with it all? No, but I've accepted that. Tags can be dealt with quite easily, in my opinion. Camo will be dicey as we lack MSV and a pure Harris. We can't deal with hackers, we're Ariadna, so glide missiles and pictures will suck. Fortunately, we can zone out infiltrators, impersonators, and other nuisances in an attempt to get our DZ in the midfield. Defensive links or big pure fire teams of 4 or 5 will really hurt us if we can be outshot on ballistic skill, but we'll match them on burst, so we'll need to smoke them out. So a common weakness that we'll need to account for, but damn will be thorny for it. Our long range deterrence is weak here, to be honest, but mid-range and shorter is fairly strong. We can hold lanes with a couple pieces and can smoke them out if need be. Overall, I'll mark down fire lanes though. Templates and zone of control is plenty here, so we can tick that. Overall, a good list, I reckon. So what did I change? So the new list, which I mean is largely a side grade, but with the lessons learned from the match, and this list has given me the optimization itch, which I want to stress is utterly unnecessary for Infinity. It's just me. Even now I'm looking at it and going, I could change X, Y, and Z, but I'll talk about that later. The small tweaks were more or less dealing with the 112's price increase and swapping the irregular bear for the regular bear, as the more armor is more imposing, and it would be more my style to kind of dominate the midfield with him instead. We have one less Armandino, so I can get a light rocket launcher on my Frontovlik, covering more mid-range, getting back my Warp Core, and basically giving a heavy shotgun to my Paracommando. In general, I think these tweaks just round off the list a little more. So how does it do for the test? Well, it's basically the same except one less Armandino for a regular controller, which is less smoke and a smaller template, but I'm more insulated in case Wallace cans it. My mid-range is better protected thanks to the light rocket launcher, and honestly could be swapped to the AP sniper rifle with MSV1 for long-range turns and active turn. I have a match soon where I'm using it, so we'll see if it's a worthwhile swap. I would lose mid-range templates, but I'm also gaining a lot with that. But I've spent enough time tweaking this, and at some point, I've got to put tools down. Template-wise, it's a bit better now that I have that impact template, but largely bears and warbands are still covering me, and that's nice. Overall, it's a better list, and I look forward to running it. So that was the video. I hope you learned something about building lists. Hopefully from the tests, and not my failures. Remember to do all that YouTube stuff. It really helps me out. And finally remember, if you can't be a good example, be a horrible, horrible warning.